The physiology of an elephant is perhaps one of the most unique and extraordinary features within the animal kingdom. An elephant provides us with such a good opportunity to work on our shading, color exploration, and just ultimately how to represent these very unique qualities through a drawing. So with that being said, hey guys, my name is Matt. Welcome to another video by artincontext.org, where we explore various interesting and quirky art related topics. And in today's tutorial, we will be learning how to draw an elephant through a few simple steps. Now, this particular tutorial is done on a digital device. However, all drawing processes are transferable to traditional mediums, so feel free to use whatever materials you have available to you. Now, there are many ways to approach an elephant drawing. However, in this tutorial, we will work through a process of layering where we build up the elephant from these lighter tonal values into these darker tonal values and slowly try to work out the very unique surface area of its skin through this process of representing shadow and light. So with that being said, we're going to start by sketching the elephant. So we want to begin with a very light sketch of the elephant, where we basically start to establish the animal in its most fundamental shape. So we will assemble these very fundamental shapes and we'll start to see how different features resemble different shapes. So we'll see that the head has a very oval-like shape, where the ears connected on either side as these more hexagonal shapes. The ears of the elephant are quite large in relation or compared to that of the head and the trunk. Now, the trunk of the elephant is this elongated cone-like shape that becomes slightly more narrow as it moves towards the tip of the trunk. We can also start to form the legs of the elephant, which could be described as very cylindrical like shapes or cylindrical in structure. And you want to think about the perspective naturally of the elephant and the pose from which angle you are drawing it. Now, a good suggestion naturally would be to consider looking at some reference images to assist you through this drawing process. But as you continue working through the shape and proportions of the elephant, this is where we kind of capture the scale and the fundamental shapes of these different features and how they are proportionally placed alongside one another. Now, you want to think about that perspective, so consider using a reference image as you kind of proceed with this process. We also want to make sure we're taking our time very lightly working through the shape and proportions of the elephant, and this is where we capture the scale once again of these various shapes. The eyes of the elephant, however, as we continue, will generally be positioned near the top of the forehead and are very small in relation or in comparison to the rest of the head. The eyes also have these ridges around them due to the very loose skin around the elephant's face or around the eyes, creating this very indented quality, and that's where the eyes will be placed. Now, naturally, as we continue, we're going to now start to refine the elephant sketch. So once we have established the general shape of the various features, we can now start to refine them with some detailed line work. This is where we begin to enhance the features and make them slightly more identifiable. So start to use some line work to really refine the outlines of various features. We can also use some line work to define the shape of the features by the way they curve and protrude, such as the curvature within the trunk, for instance. As we continue to refine the drawing with some line work, the intention here is that we can also reshape some of these features as we proceed. So by doing this, we are slowly fixing the overall form and proportions as we slowly start to tweak and edit various features as we refine the elephant drawing, slowly working through the entire body. Now, as we work our way through the lower parts of the elephant, we also want to be conscious of these very subtle details, and this includes the small curvatures within the joints that define the feet of the elephant. And this can be a very subtle kind of feature because the elephant's feet or that lower joint structure isn't necessarily clearly definable, so we do want to represent it through this very subtle curvature as we shift towards the stump-like feet of the elephant. Now, once you are satisfied with the overall shape and composition of this general outline with these refined shapes of the elephant drawing and its various features, we can then lightly erase this drawing before integrating some color, and this is where we now start to build up our color value. So now we want to start incorporating color into our elephant drawing, and we do this by starting with very light tones of gray. Now, the intention is going to be that we build up colors through layers, going from lighter tonal values to darker tonal values. So you want to continue with this process, slowly working your way through the entire elephant, and we want to already be conscious of how light will also create shadow formations at this point. Now, naturally, the elephant has a very unique wrinkled-like skin, and this is a big part of how we're going to represent very unique shadow formations within our elephant drawing, and these moments of skin or overlapping qualities create a lot of striations and shadows on the surface area. We can already start to work on these qualities with light use of gray throughout the entire body, just kind of defining the placement of these various striations within the skin or these wrinkled qualities. And you do want to continue with this process, slowly filling in the entire elephant with this very light hue of gray coloration as the base layer of the color of our elephant drawing. Now, once we have done that, we can then start to add in a little bit more darker and like mid-tone colorations. So we can proceed to work in these darker tones of gray, this time using the darker tones to really bring more form to various features. This is where you want to be aware of the structure of the elephant's various features. So for instance, you do want to be strategic with your placement of marks and consider how the structure of the elephant will develop these various shadowed areas along the surface area of the skin. Now we can start to work with layering both gray and browns. Again, an elephant's color palette is very unique and it kind of shifts between these moments of grays and browns. However, there are these very unique moments of whiter and cream-like colors within the tusk, but beyond that, generally the coloration tends to be between these grays and browns. So the intention here is to kind of work with layering both gray and brown colors at this point, slowly combining them along the elephant drawing within these various surface areas. This is going to develop a little bit more of an accurate color representation of the elephant. However, as we do this, we are still trying to use our marks to define the shapes within these various features of the elephant. So think about how browns and grays can be used both for highlights and darker or shadowed areas, and how these change in tonal value, these color variations change in tonal values to represent various moments of shadows and highlights within the different features of the elephant. But as we continue, we also want to think about the tonal variations of different features as well. For instance, the tusks are the lightest part of the elephant and should remain as such in comparison to the surrounding features especially. We can also use both lighter marks and darker marks in tandem to emphasize the structure of various features. So what is meant by this is, for instance, darker tones are good for indentations where features are least exposed to light, and this is where we'll start to see how we can use these darker tonal variations to really represent these striations developed by wrinkled skin that cast shadows along the surface area of the skin within the elephant. As we continue, the protruding features are more exposed along those surface areas, which can then be emphasized with highlights or lighter colorations. Now, as we continue, we kind of want to work our way through the entire elephant once again, bearing in mind the different colors and how they represent different tonal variations to emphasize shadows and highlighted areas. But then we can start to add in some more details to the elephant. So this is where we now proceed to work over these layers of color with some detailed line work and shading to enhance the features. Once again, a good suggestion is to start on the head. So we will find that the eyes have this very unique haze-like quality and are very small. We really want to be precious with the eyes because they are very unique and carry a lot of emotion within our elephant drawing. However, there's a lot of skin surrounding the eyes as well, and that skin tends to be slightly smaller in its wrinkled quality. So we also want to think about the scale and the size of the lines in terms of how we represent those wrinkles and shadows within those areas where the skin tends to be more tighter and slightly smaller in scale. We also want to use line work to really emphasize those wrinkles around the eyes, and again, just being precious about the scale of these different wrinkles in different body parts. We can also start to use darker line work to emphasize the wrinkles and striations or segments that run through the trunk of the elephant. And once again, naturally, you do want to think about the scale of various features. The trunk as a good example, we'll see that the striations change in scale as the trunk becomes more narrow, so naturally those striations or lines or shadows or wrinkles slightly become smaller as we kind of shift to the more narrow points of the trunk, and vice versa. So for instance, we can use line work to represent those trunks and make them slightly thicker to emphasize these deeper qualities of wrinkles near the base or the head of the elephant. Otherwise, as we continue, we now want to start using outlines or line work to kind of further define the wrinkled textural qualities of the skin. So we will find that these textural lines flow with the form of various features in the elephant. So for instance, we can use line work to represent the subtle wrinkles that run from the tips of the ears into the base of the ears, where they connect to the head of the elephant. And that's a very subtle kind of example of how striations can be defined through this use of some line work and some shadings. We can also use line work and shading to define the wrinkles that form around the legs, or move from the underbelly into the side of the elephant where it starts to become more exposed to the light source. So you'll find that the underbelly will have much more darker qualities than that of the side of the elephant, simply due to the fact that the underbelly is less exposed to a light source. Now you want to work with the shape of these various features once again to emphasize their form. So for instance, we'll find that those striations and shadows will move in an arc-like shape kind of emphasizing the rounded quality of the belly. This is also an essential aspect of representing the shape of the eyes and how they are defined by the surrounded wrinkled skin. So you really want to think about how your line work can create that indentation quality where the eyes are positioned. Take your time with this process, slowly working your way through the entire elephant drawing. It is imperative that you consider each shape of each feature and how the skin forms along their surface areas in various ways. We can also consider the size of our lines and how they can be used strategically to define wrinkles that are larger or smaller in certain areas, and that is very essential. And lastly, we can then add in some final details. So at this point we should have worked through the entire drawing of the elephant, and we can now add in some remaining features to further contextualize the elephant, such as the nails in the feet. We can also work on some more highlights to emphasize the protruding aspects of the elephant and kind of represent a little bit more of how light might reflect off of the surface area of the elephant's skin. This is simultaneously enhancing the shadowed areas as well, whilst emphasizing highlighted qualities. So taking your time, slowly work on these last details, go through your elephant drawing one last time to make sure all areas have been worked out or attended to. We can also make sure we establish the brush-like tail before finishing the drawing. Again, the tail is very unique and has this kind of similar structure to that of a lion, where the tail kind of becomes slimmer and has a kind of sprout of fur near the tip. So make sure the tail is quite narrow near its tip, with some feather-like line work at the end to create the unique brush-like tail in your elephant drawing. But otherwise, guys, you can then lastly add some surrounding environmental qualities to kind of further contextualize the elephant drawing within a space. And there you have it, how to draw an elephant through a few simple steps. Otherwise, guys, some key takeaways in this particular drawing is work out the basic sketch and shape, slowly refine those shapes into more identifiable features. Make sure you really establish that sketch before adding color. Once you have the outline and the shape of the elephant really dialed in, you can then start to build up those color values, starting with lighter hues of gray, where you slowly start to develop that under palette, that base color layer of gray. You can then slowly develop these more shadowed areas with a darker gray, working with some browns as well, and then slowly build up those colors until you get to these very darker hues of gray and brown. You can then refine the drawing with some line work and some highlights to really emphasize these features. You also want to consider the scale of your line work depending on these various features, specifically to represent the wrinkled skin, which is a very unique aspect of the elephant. And that's where you think about the width of your lines, the size, the scale, and how they are strategically used to represent different features. And then lastly, just make sure you take your time enhancing these qualities through the use of some shading and some line work, strategically integrating them over those base layers of color. But otherwise, guys, that is it, how to draw an elephant through the use of a few simple steps. The color palette of an elephant is very unique. However, you can play around with different color variations, but this tutorial does intend on showing you a very specific coloration within an elephant that is more accurate to a real representation of an elephant. If you did like this video and are interested in similar or related topics on very unique animals with very unique physiology, please do let us know in the comment section below, whether it is a monochromatic drawing or how to represent various animals with very unique color palettes and color variations. We'd love to hear back from you, and you can show your support by liking and subscribing. That helps us to grow the channel, which enables us to make more art related content for you guys. But thanks again for tuning in. That is it from me today. Until next time, see you in the next video. Cheers.